Hi, welcome back to my channel, and today my topic is about telecommunications. Back then, we needed to communicate with other people, but it was really hard. People had to ride horses, travel by boat, and even walk to different destinations. This was really hard, but we invented the telegraph. You had to use a number or series of clicks for each letter to type in words. Even though this was really complicated and inconvenient, we still used it. I'm going to show you a video of what it sounds like to press and do the Morse code on the telegraph. Even though this sound is really annoying, you have to do a series and number of clicks to do each one. That's what the telegraph sounds like and what we needed to do when we had to communicate with other people. But when other people were using the telegraph, Alexander Graham Bell was working on one of his new inventions. It was the telephone. One of the first telephones looked like this. It had an earpiece and a mouthpiece to hear and talk, but it was also really hard to communicate with other people because you had to use the wire, and other people had to be on the phone too. My first fact is about satellite communications. Back then, we had to rely on satellites to communicate, but we don't use the satellite we use now to graph images of Earth. Instead, we used geostationary satellites. Geostationary satellites orbited around Earth the same pace that Earth orbits. And they do it because they want to focus on one main part of Earth instead of going on different places. That's why it orbits the same pace as Earth, like the moon. And the geostationary satellite went through a process. First, the computer messages were sent. Then radio waves carried it to the ground station to transmit the signal. Then the geostationary satellite relied on the ground station to transmit the signal back to the other ground station like that, and then the ground station transmitted it to the other message, so the other person would get the message. I know this is very complicating, but that's how computer messages were sent with satellites. Isn't it fascinating that satellites were used to communicate with other people, and we also had to use computers to message? Now let's talk about cables and wires. Back then, people also had to rely on cables and wires to send messages back and forth. Cables and wires weren't that bad because you had to use one of these, and there would be optic fibers in there to transmit the signal. And telephones relied on these, and this was the process. The optic fibers are made of thin pieces of glass, and then they are usually to connect exchanges from other people. So one person would transfer the optic fiber to the other person, and the other person would transfer it back. A fun fact is that optic fibers can carry up to 6,000 calls at a time. We would use this for calling instead of having for people to call a person who calls another person who calls another person to receive the message. Now let's talk about wireless networks. Today we use wireless networks. We don't need wires. It is very easy to transport messages from phone to phone. If your dad or mom have a phone and they're texting each other from far distances, it's really easy because the message will just appear on your screen when it is delivered. And we also use cellular phones that look like this. These did not exactly need wires and cables to communicate with other people. My school has cellular phones, and you just have to press these buttons and you have to enter the phone number, then pick up the phone and call the other person. But this was only used to receive signals within small distances, so it cannot receive a signal from all across the world. And since we don't need cables and wires, instead we use radio waves to communicate. These are also called microwaves, and it goes into a system from phone to phone. And now I'm going to talk about the internet. We also use the internet, and there's 7 ways to chat in the internet, including email and also chat. We can send emails to other people and also chat with other people. We can even do FaceTimes and see the other person on the screen with our phones today. When I FaceTime my grandpa and grandma, I'm able to see their faces, and this was very hard to invent, but we were able to see other person's faces instead of just having to hold the phone to our ear and hearing the person talking. Internet was used and it was very useful to first see the other people, but also talk on the phone. We also use radio waves, cables and wires, and optic fibers sometimes to message people and also call other people. And signals will travel through each one in order to get messages and also calls. In conclusion, I believe our world has changed a lot, and we had a lot of advanced technology. We went from the telephone that Alexander Graham Bell invented to the phones we use now, where we can FaceTime. I think the internet was very helpful because now I'm able to see people from across the world, and we can easily send messages. Thank you for listening. I hope you like and subscribe to my channel.